I did a sermon one time on cohabitation. You ever hear of cohabitation? It's where a man and woman live together without the benefit of marriage. Very, very common in our society today. It is, statistically, I believe it's almost as common as marriage is now. Cohabitation. It's not God's design, folks. It's not God's design because there's no commitment there. How about no-fault divorce? Is that another one of man's perversions? No-fault divorce, you know. You can get divorced for any reason. Is that what Jesus said in this passage? No. You know, they were divorcing for any reason. Moses gave him a certificate of divorce, as it says in a parallel version, or parallel passage. And why would he give? Jesus says, because of the hardness of your heart. Because the women in those situations were getting left without any recourse, without anything. They were getting left destitute. They were left without any legal standing. And because of that, they were oftentimes driven into prostitution because they had no legal standing as a divorced wife. And you could divorce somebody, according to the rabbis, for just about anything. You know, if your wife burned your toast. I got to tell you a story about my wife. She's not here, so I can tell this story. Actually, she tells this story all the time. She was pregnant with my first child, with our daughter Michelle. We lived in an 8x30 trailer up in El Jebel. No, I actually was up in Glenwood. We lived in an 8x30 trailer, and she got big enough that she couldn't fit down the hallway anymore. Eventually we had to move because she couldn't go down the hallway. She couldn't turn any particular way to get down the hallway. She was as wide as she was. Never mind. You can imagine that. She was very pregnant. And so she was fixing my breakfast one morning, which was very nice of her to do. And I called her Buddha. Well, there was some resemblance there, you know. She happened to be at the time putting jelly on my toast, and so she walked over to me, I had my back turned to her, and she took the toast and the jelly and rubbed it on my head, and then ran and locked herself in the bathroom. According to rabbinical law, I could have divorced her that day. Really, back then, there were almost any reason at all you could divorce your wife, and Jesus held up a higher standard. Jesus said, except for the cause of unchastity, except for the cause of unfaithfulness, then you shouldn't divorce your wife. So, all those who burn toast, there is hope for you. No-fault divorce. We have changed it back to the standards of the rabbinical law. We have gone backwards, and now you can divorce your spouse for any reason at all again. You don't have to give a reason at all, as a matter of fact. I would say to you, that's man's law. Look at God's standards. Live by God's standards instead. Fornication. Fornication is sex before marriage. And fornication is very much a part of people's lives today. Adultery is sex after marriage that you have with someone other than your spouse. That's a very much a part of society today. It's almost so commonplace that you don't even think about it anymore, right? Back when I was young, there was still some shame associated with those kinds of perversions that we've just read about. But today, almost anything is acceptable. And finally, I think one of the most insidious, one of the most difficult ones is today pornography. With the spread of computers and the internet, pornography is so available to anyone at any time. And it's become such a pervasive problem among all generations, all ages. It's become such a pervasive problem that it is destroying the very fabric of not only families, but of our society as a whole. Because pornography, we think, is a victimless crime, and it is not. Victims are not just the young ladies that are portrayed in different kinds of ways on the screen of our computer, but it's also the people who live in your home, your children, your spouse, all are victims of pornography as well. If you participate in pornography, your whole household is affected, and society ultimately will be destroyed by it. By inundating girls and women with a message that their most worthy attribute is how hot they are, we are preparing them for the fall that leads into pornography. We're no different than the grooming in our society. We're no different than the grooming that a pedophile would do, or that the grooming that perhaps a person who was trying to ruin some young lady's life. By promoting that, your daughters, what do you say to them? You should say they're beautiful, because all people are beautiful in some way, aren't they? You should help them to have a good self-esteem, but we should not carry forward the message that society has carried forward, that unless you are slim and beautiful, you don't count for anything. Unless you look like a model, that you're not where you should be. We need to understand that there's a lot more to beauty than just the outward appearance, right? Pornography and the sexual making of our society leads us down a path that will ultimately destroy our children if we allow it to go that far. The physical effects of pornography, and the most recent findings in science, it says that porn acts like a drug, like alcohol would, or perhaps some other drug would. What it does, it stimulates your mind, releases endorphins and other feel-good kinds of feelings, and in that process, you can become addicted to it. You can become addicted to it. The statistics, even in churches, of particularly men who are addicted to pornography, are astounding. I hope it's not true in our church. But the statistics are so great that I was quite surprised when I read those statistics. It's so easy to be lured into pornography. The University of New Hampshire did a study that showed that the states with the highest readership of pornographic magazines like Playboy and Penthouse also had the highest rape rate as well. It begins to play on people's minds, and soon they begin to act out what they see. But I just want to describe to you a process, because I really think we need to hear this, and I hope that everybody understands. I'm not just trying to describe something, well, let me put it this way. Pornography, you get a little bit of it in any internet screen. Any news organization that you have go to their website is going to have some picture on there someplace that is a lure to get you to click on that picture. I love Pandora, but Pandora always wants to hook me up to the single women in Newcastle and Rifle. I mean, it's going to be there. If you click on that, you've started a process. And you think, oh no, what's that going to hurt? Well, you just watch. You click on that, you're going to be clicking on something a little deeper, and a little deeper, and a little deeper. I don't know if you've ever heard Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy was arrested up in Aspen some years ago. He was a serial killer. He killed young women. After doing terrible things to them, then he would kill young women, and he was arrested here in Colorado. He'd done it across the United States, but he did an interview with James Dobson, and on that interview he described the process. He said he began looking at Playboy, and soon that wasn't enough. Then he began to look at harder porn. And then he began to want to act out some of the things he said, he saw. And it wasn't enough to have willing participants eventually. It began eventually to enter into snuff pornography. And the end process of that is, I believe, over 20-something women died by his hands. He described a process. You know, that process back in his day, and that was a while because I was young back when they arrested him, so that was a long time ago. It's so much worse today. It's so much easier to get involved in it today. You don't have to have a Playboy magazine to get involved in it today. All you have to have is the internet to get involved in it today. You're told you must have the internet in order to do well in school, in order to make it through life. And it's a very thing that you need to have in order to do well in school that may lead you down that path. And you think, well, I'm sure if Ted Bundy as a young man was sitting here before that time, he would have thought it never would be me that would do that. When he heard about somebody else, he would have said, oh, no, that's not me. I'm saying you give in a little bit. A little bit becomes a little bit more. It becomes a little bit more. Pornography will lead you to things you don't want to be involved in. And it hurts everybody around you. And I'm sorry to spend some time here, but I really think we need to hear this, and we need to relate this to our children, and we need to relate this to other people, because pornography seems like fun to begin with, like you're getting away with something to begin with, but eventually it will lead you into hurting everybody around you. Pornography can destroy marriages because the man most often has this idealized vision of the woman that his wife can never live up to, no matter how hard she tries, no matter what she looks like. She can never live up to this airbrushed image that he's going to see on his computer. She's never going to perform like he sees in X-rated videos. She's never going to live up to it, and eventually it's going to cause distance between the man and the woman in the marriage, and eventually lead to a cold relationship, ultimately lead to a dissolution of that relationship. If not legally, at least in real intents and means. It's going to lead to difficulty with the children. It's going to affect the relationship with the children. And pedophiles come through a process that involves pornography 99% of the time. People who abuse children sexually come through a process of pornography. How do you get out of a society that's inundated with pornography? How do you live a pure life in the midst of it? You don't click on the first one. If you don't click on the first one, you won't be tempted to click on the second one. You understand what I'm saying? You don't start, and don't think you're so strong that you can handle part of it, because you're not. You're not. I know I'm not. I don't click on the first one because I don't trust myself. In Corinthians it says, be careful if you think you stand, take heed lest you fall. You may think that you're strong enough to handle something, but if it's not a good something, don't do it, because you're not as strong as you think you are. You're not as strong as you think you are. You can fall and you can fail, and it can be so quickly that you are amazed at it. Now I want to talk to you about God's. This describes that relationship. He talks about how we are to be pure in heart, how we're not even to look after a woman to lust with her. We've already committed adultery in our mind if we look at a woman in that way.